Rajasthan, a state of cultural harmony, tribal beauty, enchanting folk music and musical instruments. Daredevil deeds, chivalry, and warmth.
The state of Rajasthan has a square-shaped outline. It has north-south and east-west trending diagonals.
Rajasthan is the largest state in India with a total surface area of 3,42,239 square kilometers, which is about 10.75% of the area of the country.
About 50% of the state's surface area is arid zone. Nearly 3/4 of the arid zone is under the cover of sand dunes.
On the basis of physiography, the state of Rajasthan can be conveniently divided into 4 main geomorphic segments. These are
The plains of Thar Desert,
the uplands of Hadoti and Malwa,
the eastern plains,
and the Aravalli Mountains.
Aravalli mountain is known as the oldest mountain in the world. Truly speaking, it may not be that old, but the rocks that make up the rock is very old.
Aravalli, the most distinctive and ancient mountain chain of peninsular India, marks the site of one of the oldest geological formations in the world.
We think that the Rajasthan region is a region where you can see the whole history of crustal evolution from 3.5 billion years old, which is Archean. In geological terms, they are known as the Archan Period, and going through the Proterozoic period, which is starting from 2.5 billion years and going up to 500 million years.
The Aravalli Mountains lie east of the Thar Desert and cross Rajasthan diagonally for a distance of about 800 kilometers.
It is a typical encealic mountain range of olden Proterozoic rocks, having an age span between 2,500 and 850 million years from today.
The first group of rocks which forms the basement of this mountain formed during the period between 350 and 250 crores of years from today, if you calculate from today.
The Archean rocks, which form the foundation of the mountain, have a history of 1 billion years.
The oldest rocks are believed to have originated before 3,300 million years from today.
We can define various age-related stratigraphic horizons. So we start the history from about 2,000 million years. We got rocks, sedimentary rocks of 2,000 million years old, which are lying on top of a rock sequence, which you call the banded gneissic complex, which are dated to be 3.5 billion years, 3,500 million years old rocks.
There are also different names. Mostly we'd like to prefer to call these rocks as Mewar gneiss complex, because these rocks are best developed in the Mewar plains. A characteristic feature of these rocks is that these are highly banded character. So that means the rocks suffered structural change as well as metamorphic changes. during the period of their formation and subsequent to that.
The Aravalli mountain range, unlike the Himalayas, does not form a continuous range as it is dissected at many places.
The later tectonic movements have caused submergence of this oldest mountain range along its extreme margins.
When Himalaya was rising, the region in the lap of the Himalaya, which now constitutes the Indo-Gangetic alluvial plain, was buckling down. And along with that buckling, the Aravalli part of the Aravalli mountain in the northern part also buckled down and produced the depression. So that's why we know from the topographic feature of the Aravallis beyond Delhi exists only in form of a ridge, subterranean ridge below the Indo-Gangetic alluvial plain.
The remainder of Aravalli range extends up to Delhi in the north, in the plains of Gujarat in the south, and runs continuously from the southwest of Sirohi to northwest of Khetadi.
In the plan view, the Aravalli mountains look like two fans joined handle to handle.
Both the fans are well defined. The northern fan particularly is upper side of the northern flank appears a little open because the hills there gets subdued in height, attaining height about 100 meters from the ground level, and which gradually becomes lower down and merges with the northern flank. In the southern part, the southern fan particularly is very sharply defined, particularly the southern boundary, which is marked by a fault plain, along which the mountain rises up very sharply and overlooking the flat alluvial plains down below.
The central part of the common handle is less than 10 kilometers wide.
The northern fan of the Aravalli mountains covers the districts of Jaipur, Alwar and Dausa.
The average elevation of the quartzite ridges of the Alwar hills is between 550 to 670 meters from the mean sea level. The Aravalli ranges present a different landscape from Sikar to Ajmer as compared to the Alwar hills.
Physiographically, the region is known as the Sambar Basin, which occupies the most depressed part of the eastern Shekhawati hills. It is about 25 kilometers long along east-west direction.
The width varies from 4.5 kilometers to about 16 kilometers.
The central part of the Aravalli mountains is also known as the Merwara Hills.
This is the thinnest part of the mountain and forms common handle of the two fans of the Aravalli mountains.
The Aravalli mountain in this stretch is virtually impregnable.
The highest points in the main Aravalli range is at a place called Borath Plateau, which is close to Kumbhalgarh, which is a very famous peak. There is a fort at Kumbhalgarh also. That's the Borath Plateau, and that's the highest point in that region.
The highest peak of the Bhorat Pathar is the Jarga Parbat,
rising to 1,316 meters. This is the second highest point in Rajasthan.
The highest point is Guru Shikhar in Mount Abu. It is 1,722 meters high.
The hill mass of Abu is separated by the main ridges of the southern Mewar hills by a wide northeast-southwest running valley.
The Guru Shikhar is not only the highest peak in the Abu block, but of entire Indian shield north of the Nilgiri mountains.
Abu is truly a block, is separated from the main Aravalli hills, separated by a valley. It's a raised block, looks like a tableland with virtually flat top.
There's a lot of faults across the Aravalli Hill range, and these faults, as I said, are responsible for uplift and downthrow of the blocks, and that has caused the elevation difference in many places, and also the river system that is cutting across those areas. Like, you know, the Sambar Lake is a depression. Now we think that the Sambar Lake is a graben, which, you know, graben means a fault block which has gone down, and therefore you have the basin formed, a sort of a depression formed in which of the water logging and things like that, you know, salt being deposited there.
The evolutionary history of Aravalli Mountains was first explained by A.M. Heron, one of the greatest geologists. The history includes 3 successive cycles of basin evolution, namely magmatism, metamorphism, and tectonic inversion.
Meteorite bombardment over the Earth's crust, which at that time the crustal area is mostly conglomerated in form of a Gondwana land. So the India got fragmented because of the impact of that impact. The other causes, other damages that caused by the meteorite is the destruction of the dinosaurs from the globe. And physically, this separation of India due to meteorite depression produced several fractures, and we find lots of fractures in conjugate sets over the Aravalli Mountains also. So subsequent to that, when India started moving northward due to breakup and moving northward, it passed over several plume heads, that is called hot spots coming from the temperature from the below, and Indian crust got affected because of that, and that effect we also find in some parts of the Aravalli and in the surrounding regions.
Now at about 2000 million years ago, something happened, crustal deformation, and then stretching of the continental crust was taking place. And once you do that, you have a lot of faulting. You generate a basin which will receive sediments from the surrounding areas, and the basins are formed which will contain the sediments as well as volcanic material coming from the deep down in the Earth's crust, and they will fill up this basin. So that was the formation of the rocks of the Aravalli supergroup at about 2000 million years ago. And then at about 1500 million years ago, these rocks were crushed, compressed, and then you have a first orogeny formed at 1500 million years. And that was the time when the folded rocks of the Aravalli sensu stricto belt formed. That means the Udaipur Basawara belt. When this was happening, you have another basin formed on the northwestern part. For example, Ajmer, Bewar, and down south, Basantgarh, Abu, and all. This is the main Aravalli spine. That was formed at 1500 million years ago with the separation of this continental crust which was covering the whole region, including the Mewar and Marwar. So it parted, and the basin was formed at about 1500 million years ago. Again, the same story, you fill it up with sediments, you fill it up with volcanics, and that formed the Delhi supergroup of rocks. And I say that Delhi supergroup of rocks age is about 1500 to 1000 million years. So these are the rocks which formed at the time. So you see that there's a diachronous event. You have a first Aravalli supergroup and then the second Delhi supergroup. But they are all contained in the Aravalli mountain range, which means the Aravalli mountain range, the age of formation spans from about 2000 million years to about 1000 million years. So it's a wide span of time which contributed to the formation of the rocks of the Aravalli mountain range.
The next major impact on the Aravalli was the impact of the collision of the two continents which produced the Himalayan mountain belt. That was approximately 35 crores years ago.
Aravalli is also a collisional mountain belt, but much older. At about 1,000 million years ago, there was a collision of Mewar block and the Marwar block along the Aravalli range. And what happens, the Mewar block slided down into the Marwar block, just like the Indian block or Indian shield slided down into the Asian block, forming the Himalayan mountain range in between. Similarly, the Mewar block, which was a continental block, and the Marwar block, continental block, they collided at about 1,000 million years ago. Then the Mewar block slided down into the Marwar block. And that caused the perturbation of heat generated at the what you call leading edge. And that created the volcanics coming up. When you slide down a block, which goes to about 100 kilometers depth, it melts. So the Mewar block went down along the edge of the Aravallis and went inside the Marwar block. And when it reached about 100 kilometers depth, it melted. So the melt material came up. And that is where we get the Malani volcanic rocks. A lot of rhyolites and volcanic sediment. These are the product of that kind of melting that took place at about 750 million years ago.
References to the Aravalli Mountains are traceable in ancient literatures as a mountain that stands askew to the east-west trending Himalaya and the Vindhyan ranges known as the Satpura Mountains in the geological literatures.
The Aravalli Mountains not only prevented the sand movement to the east, but also formed a formidable barrier for the ancient people to cross over, particularly in the southern part.
In spite of being an ancient geomorphic wealth, the mountain has very prominent relief features.
It controls to a great extent the climatic conditions prevailing in northern part of India. In fact, it acts as a protecting shield for the protecting the advancement of the desert to the east. And if we see the territory east of Aravalli mountain, then we know that from that point onward till we reach the Pacific coast near Hong Kong, this is the territory of a green belt, is a fertile territory. But if we move to the west of the mountain, this is the beginning of the desert, which starts with Third, continues through Arabian Peninsula, north of Africa, then across the Atlantic Ocean, it reaches the southern part of Northern America and Mexico. So that way it is a divider. It acted as a dividing line.
The other rocky terrains, mostly exposed as a very low sandstone plateau, are younger formations than Aravallis, known as Vindhyans.
The difference between the Aravalli and the Vindhyan is the fact that Aravalli range is a dissected mountain range with isolated hills, and Vindhyan hill is a plateau defined by a big boundary fault, great boundary fault, which has raised the plateau up against the Marwar pediment.
The Aravalli has been a lifeline to people living in this region since ages.
Aravallis have been responsible for fulfilling the carbon budget of the animal world.
It has been providing livelihood to the local people since ancient times.
In the next part of this film, we shall discuss the living Aravalli.